The transmission came on a Tuesday. Nobody was ready for it. Nobody could have been. It arrived like a stone dropped into still water, quiet at first, then spreading out in every direction until there was no part of the surface it had not touched. Admiral Doug Crane was sitting in a budget meeting when his aide stepped through the door and handed him a folded piece of paper. The aide did not speak. That alone told Crane something was wrong. He unfolded it under the table, read it once, read it again, then looked up at the 11 people still talking around him about fuel costs and contract renewals. "Everyone out," he said. Not loud. Not sharp. The kind of voice that does not need volume because the weight of it does the work. They filed out. The door closed. Crane sat alone in the room for 11 minutes. The paper sat on the table in front of him. 3 words in a language no human had ever spoken, and beneath them, in plain English, the translation a team of linguists had worked through the night to produce. It said, "We are sorry." 2,000 miles away, in a forward operating base outside of Albuquerque that smelled like dust and motor oil, Staff Sergeant Cole Renner was sitting on an overturned crate with a cleaning rod in his hand and his sidearm broken down in pieces on a cloth in front of him. A field radio on the shelf above him was putting out static and fragments of an emergency broadcast. He had been half listening to it for 20 minutes. He listened closer now. The broadcast was explaining what had been received. What it meant. The voice on the radio was trying very hard to sound calm and doing a poor job of it. Cole set down the cleaning rod. He looked at the parts of his weapon laid out in front of him. He looked at the radio. Then he picked the cleaning rod back up and kept working. "Well, shoot," he said, to no one. He finished cleaning the weapon. Reassembled it. Checked the action. Set it down. Sat for a moment with his hands on his knees, looking at the floor, doing some quiet kind of thinking that had no name and needed none. Then he stood up and went to find his sergeant major. The alien landed at a United Nations site outside Geneva 3 days later. It came in a ship that looked like nothing any human engineer had ever drawn. Long and pale, like a bone left out in the sun. It touched down without a sound. The crowd that had gathered behind the barriers was enormous. The cameras were everywhere. The alien that stepped out was thin. Almost impossibly thin, like something that had been stretched until the middle of it got worried. Its skin, if skin was the right word, shifted color slowly as it moved. Greens and soft blues and once, when it looked at the crowd, a deep and complicated gold. Its name was Velsatori. It was the diplomatic representative of the Galactic Accord. It had 41 species standing behind it and a message it had been asked to deliver. It had expected guns. It got journalists. It stood at the edge of the landing platform and looked out at the cameras and the shouting and the signs people were holding up, some welcoming, some afraid, some just confused, and it processed this for a long moment. Then it was guided to a building where people handed it paperwork. In its first report back to the Accord Council, Velsatori wrote, "They bureaucratized us. There were forms. I do not understand them. I do not think I am supposed to." The private briefing happened 3 days after that. A room in a building with no windows and more security than a bank. Velsatori across a plain table from Admiral Crane. A translator device between them, small and unimpressive looking. 2 human aides standing by the wall like they were hoping the wall would absorb them. Crane looked at the alien the way a man looks at a thing he has been thinking about for a long time and is only now seeing clearly. Velsatori looked at Crane the way a field mouse looks at a hawk, knowing it is in trouble either way. Having made its choice. They talked for a long time about the devouring. What it was. Where it had come from. How many worlds it had taken. The numbers were large enough that they stopped feeling like numbers and started feeling like silence, the kind of silence that fills a room after something very bad has been said out loud. The Accord had tried talking to it. It did not talk back. The Accord had tried retreating. It followed. The Accord had tried fighting. They did not have a word, Velsatori explained carefully, for what they were. They were builders, traders, thinkers. In 11,000 years of recorded history, they had never needed soldiers. Crane listened to all of it without interrupting. When Velsatori was finished, it said the thing it had been instructed not to say. The council had told it to stick to facts, to stay diplomatic, to not say this particular thing. But it said it anyway, because it thought this human deserved to understand what he was being handed. "We have been watching your world," it said, "for 600 years. We classified it as a Category 9 biological hazard. We watched your people go to war with each other. We watched disease move through your cities. We watched you rebuild. We watched you put the names of the dead on the buildings you built over the rubble. It paused. We were going to quarantine your planet. Indefinitely. We were afraid of what your people would do if you ever left. Crane did not move. We never planned to ask for help, Velsatari said. We had no other choice. The room was very quiet. The aides by the wall had stopped breathing, or close to it. Crane looked at the alien across the table. His face was unreadable in the way that a very still body of water is unreadable. You cannot see the bottom, but you know there is one. What we'd do, he said. Not a question. Velsatari's bioluminescence dimmed slightly. Just slightly. Yes, it said. Crane looked at the table. Then he stood up, which signaled the end of the meeting, and thanked the alien for coming, which was the correct and diplomatic thing to do. He walked out of the building into grey afternoon light. His aide fell into step beside him and began talking about the next briefing. Crane did not hear a word of it. He was thinking about a piece of paper with 3 words on it, and a room he had sat in alone for 11 minutes, and the particular kind of weight that settles on a person when they understand what they have just been handed. He did not sleep well that night. He would not sleep well for a long time after. Nora Feld got her assignment on a Wednesday morning while drinking the worst coffee in the state of Virginia. She was sitting in a plastic chair at Langley, still in her flight jacket, still smelling like an aircraft that had spent 6 hours at high altitude. The coffee was from a vending machine that had been broken in 2 different ways for 3 months. She was drinking it anyway because it was hot and she was not. The briefing package landed on her lap courtesy of a colonel she had never met who did not introduce himself and walked away immediately after, which she respected. She read it in 4 minutes. Spent 3 of those 4 on the section about the devouring, what it had taken, how fast it moved, the math of its trajectory toward the Accord's remaining inhabited systems. She drank the rest of the coffee. It had gone cold. Oh, you have got to be kidding me, she said. Then she signed the bottom of the last page and went to find her gear. The joint training facility went up fast in the Nevada desert, which was the kind of landscape that made people from other planets understand why Earth had produced the species it did. Nothing pretty about it. Just heat and distance and rock that looked like it had given up on being anything else. The Accord observers arrived in a group of 12. Scientists, medics, military analysts from species that did not have military analysts and had pulled the title from the closest equivalent job they could think of. They were given a viewing platform with shade and filtered air and chairs designed to accommodate 6 different body types. They watched the humans train. Day 1 was standard drills. Running, equipment checks, weapons handling, navigation in low visibility. The Accord observers took notes. Careful, organized notes. Professionally curious. Day 2, the humans ran the same drills and temperatures that the Accord's chief medical officer flagged as biologically dangerous. She filed a formal concern with the base commander. He thanked her politely and the drills continued. Day 3 they ran them again, before sunrise, in a dust storm. The observers stopped filing formal reports after that. There was a silence in the viewing platform on day 3 that was different from the silence of the first 2 days. It was the silence of people who had just understood something they had not expected to understand, and were not entirely sure how to feel about it. One observer, a Tessari researcher named Ethveru, wrote in a personal log that night, "They practice dying so that dying becomes familiar. I think that is the point. I think the point is the only reason they are still alive as a species. I do not have a framework for this. I am constructing one." Cole arrived at the Joint Command vessel 2 weeks into training. He had been assigned as ground-to-orbit tactical liaison, which was a title that meant he was the person both sides called when they needed someone to translate between the way humans did things and the way the Accord expected things to be done. He was not good at the title. He was good at the actual job, which was different. He walked the vessel in his first 2 days aboard, getting a feel for the layout, learning the corridors the way he had learned the ranchland he grew up on, not by map but by foot, by repetition, by the small details that told you where you were without having to think about it. He met Velsatari again on the 3rd day. The alien was in the corridor outside the science bay, standing in front of a star map display that took up most of the wall. The map showed the devouring's trajectory. The line it drew through space was a clean and terrible thing. Red against black. Moving toward a cluster of small dots that represented the Accord's last inhabited systems. At its current speed, the numbers said 4 months. Cole stopped beside the alien. He looked at the map. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then, "You didn't call us because you thought we could win." Velsatari's color shifted. Something quieter than it had been before. "No," it said. "You called us because you'd run out of things that could lose slowly enough to matter." The alien looked at the map. Then at Cole. Then back at the map. It did not answer. It did not need to. Cole nodded once and walked on. The alien stood in front of the red line for a long time after he was gone. In a field tent on the training base, Lena Burke and a Tessari medic named Vethora were going through trauma response data together. Vethora had 6 recording limbs and was using all of them. Lena had a cup of actual good coffee that she had produced from somewhere and was not sharing. They had been working together for a week. Vethora was careful and precise and extremely polite in a way that felt like it was covering up genuine unease. Lena was none of those things and made no effort to be. Vethora asked, carefully, "The pain tolerance data for your people is outside any range we have documented for sapient species. The nerve response exists. The pain is real. How do your people function through it at the recorded levels?" Lena looked up from the chart she was reading. She thought about this genuinely, the way she thought about medical problems, turning it over, looking at it from different sides, finding the simple answer under the complicated surface. "We get mad," she said. "Works about as well as anything." Vethora wrote this down with all 6 limbs moving at once. Then it looked at what it had written. Then it wrote something else underneath it, which translated roughly to, "Follow-up required." Much follow-up required. On the last day of the training period, Norefeld flew 3 simulated combat runs in a modified atmospheric fighter that had been redesigned for deep space engagement. The first run she completed in standard time. The second she completed faster. The third she completed with one of the ship's 2 main systems turned off, because the evaluator had shut it down mid-run to see what she would do. She landed, climbed out, looked at the damage the simulation had flagged on the display, and patted the side of the ship once. The way you pat a horse that has done something difficult and done it well. The Accord's flight analyst watching from the ground wrote in her report that the gesture was non-functional and context unclear, but that she had watched it 4 times and was still thinking about it. That night, Velsatari sent a message to the Accord Council. It was longer than its usual reports. It covered training observations, tactical assessments, projected human combat capability. At the end, it added a section that was not in the standard format. It was not analysis. It was closer to a question. It said, "We have been studying them for 600 years and we understood them as dangerous. I think we were right about the fact and wrong about the nature of it. I am not sure dangerous is the word I would use now. I am not sure I have the right word. I will continue looking." The council read it, filed it, did not respond to the last part. Velsatari did not expect them to. The first engagement lasted 4 hours and 22 minutes. The briefings had covered what to expect. The data models were thorough. The projections were based on every piece of information the Accord had gathered over decades of watching the devouring move through star systems the way fire moves through dry grass. Not fast, not slow, just steady and complete and utterly without interest in what it destroyed. The briefings were wrong in the way that all briefings about something genuinely new are wrong. Not in the facts. In the scale of the feeling. The devouring was bigger than the models had prepared them for. Not in measurement. The numbers had been accurate enough. But there is a difference between reading a number and being inside that number, and every person on every human vessel that came out of the jump point and saw it for the first time had a moment. Just a moment. Where the brain stalled. Then the alarm started and the moment was over. On the deck of the lead destroyer, Cole Renner was doing damage control before the first contact hit registered. He had learned, over years of being in places where things went bad fast, that the first thing you do when something is about to go wrong is get ahead of it by half a step. Never more. Half a step. He was already at the secondary relay station when the first impact shook the deck. He grabbed the rail. Got his feet under him. Got back to work. The devouring did not attack the way the models said. It did not have a front. It had no clear point of weakness to move against, no formation to read and respond to. It came from too many directions at once, not because it was intelligent in the way humans understood intelligence, but because it was vast in the way that weather is vast. It did not need a strategy. It was the strategy. Accord vessels fell back at the 14-minute mark. This was protocol. This was correct. This was what they had trained to do when contact exceeded projected parameters, which it had done immediately and completely. 3 human destroyers did not fall back. Cole was running numbers in his head. Not with instruments. There was not time for instruments, and 2 of the relevant stations on his deck were down anyway. He was running them the way he had run numbers his whole life, the way someone who grew up fixing broken machinery on a cattle ranch runs numbers, with the hands as much as the head, with feel, with a particular kind of knowing that comes from having been wrong enough times to understand what right feels like. He called it at the 18-minute mark. The kind of call that is wrong in every simulation. Wrong on paper. Wrong by any model the Accord had ever run. The kind of call that requires a very specific combination of information, experience, and willingness to be completely wrong in front of everyone. It was right. Barely. In the way that barely matters and completely does. The 3 destroyers pulled the Devouring's attention for long enough. The Accord vessels, which had fallen back to the rally point, were able to reposition. The strike that Cole had seen coming, had felt coming, had known coming in the part of him that did not use words, hit a section of space that was empty by the time it arrived. 22 minutes total. Then the retreat order came down and every human vessel moved. Nora Feld brought her shuttle in on 1 working thruster. The other had gone out at the 30-minute mark, during the pullback, when a piece of debris the size of a car had clipped the port side and taken the thruster housing with it. She had looked at the warning light, said come on at the instruments in a tone that was not asking them to work so much as informing them that they would, and then she had flown the remaining distance on what she had. She landed on the main deck. Rough but down. She climbed out of the cockpit and stood on the deck in the noise and heat of a ship that was still sorting out what had just happened, and she looked at the damage on her shuttle, the crumpled port side, the missing housing. The viewport she had noticed was cracked at the 40-minute mark and had then not thought about again because there was nothing to be done about it and things you cannot do anything about are not worth the processing time. She put her hand flat on the hull of the shuttle. Kept it there for a second. Then she went to the debrief. On the command vessel, the Accord observers had watched the engagement footage in a silence that kept getting quieter. Which should not have been possible, but was. Velsatari sat with them and watched the footage and then, when the others began discussing it, asked for the unedited feed to be played back. It went through the hours of footage looking for something specific. It found it at the 2-hour and 40-minute mark. 14 seconds. Cole Renner, alone in a corridor between decks, standing with his face close to a bulkhead. Not doing anything. Not talking, not moving, not checking equipment. Just standing there, face to the metal wall, for 40 seconds. Then he straightened up. Walked back to the bridge. Velsatari flagged the clip. Sent it to the council with a note. The council wrote back asking for annotation. What was the human doing? What did it mean? Velsatari thought about this for a long time before answering. It wrote, I believe he was afraid. I believe he went back anyway. I do not have a category for this in any framework I have been trained in. I am not sure the category exists in your language or mine. The council read this and did not respond. A medic named Ray OTT died in the first engagement. The impact that took out the secondary relay station on Deck 4 had also taken the compartment behind it. He had been in that compartment. He had been 26 years old and from a small town in Kentucky, and had steady hands that Lena Burke had noticed on his first day and quietly approved of. That night, Lena wrote his name on the inside of her kit bag with a black marker. Small letters. Neat. She kept working. The debrief lasted 3 hours. Cole walked through the engagement the way he walked through everything. Step by step, no rush, no drama, finding the shape of it. What had worked? What had not? What the data said and what the data missed. Nora sat across the table eating a protein bar and reading the damage assessment in between bites. She asked 2 questions. Both were good questions. The kind that cut through to something everyone else had been circling around. The Accord's senior tactical observer, a Tessari named Vethmora, watched these 2 humans work and sent a private message to Velsatari that said only, I think I understand now what you meant. I am not sure I wanted to. Velsatari received this and sent back a single word in the Tessari root language. It meant, yes. Outside the viewport, the debris from the engagement drifted in the dark. Slow and silent and without any awareness of what it had been part of. The stars behind it burned the same as always. They did not care. They never had. The humans went back to work anyway. The Accord sent the transmission to every sheltered population center still receiving signals. It said, "Humanity is holding the line." 11 words. The shortest transmission the Council had ever sent. It went out on every frequency they had left, bouncing through relay stations toward the world still waiting in the dark for news that meant something. What the Council did not transmit, what Velsatari reported in a private file that was stored and not distributed, was the other piece of information. The one that had no precedent. The one that the senior science team had argued about for 6 hours before agreeing that they had read it correctly. The devouring had paused. 17 seconds. During the second major engagement, when the human destroyer wing had executed a converging strike from 3 angles at once, a tactic no Accord species had ever used because no Accord species had enough independent command judgment at the unit level to pull it off without central coordination, the devouring had gone still. 17 seconds. In 11,000 years of recorded Accord history, it had never done that. Nora flew the second engagement from the cockpit of a redesigned strike craft that handled like a suggestion of what a ship should be, recommendations, not commitments. She had been given 6 hours with it before they launched. She had spent 4 of those hours taking it apart in her head and 2 of them making friends with its particular failures. Every ship had particular failures. The ones you knew were the ones you could work with. She went in on the left flank of the converging strike. The plan was tight, which she liked, and required everyone to hit their marks inside a 15-second window, which she liked more. Tight plans did not leave room for doubt. There was only the next step, and the one after that. Contact. The devouring was vast in a way that kept being new no matter how many times you looked at it. Like a hole in space that had learned to move. She had a job to do and she did it, threading the strike craft through trajectories she was building in her head faster than she could have spoken them, reading the space around her in the way she read weather from a cockpit, not as data points but as a single continuous thing that she was part of and moving through. The converging strike connected. The devouring paused. In her cockpit Nora said, "There it is," at the exact moment it happened, though she did not know yet what she had seen. She would understand it later, reading the sensor data in debrief. For now she just knew that something had shifted, a change in the pressure of what she was flying through, like a room that has been loud going suddenly quiet. She used the 17 seconds. She did not waste them. The line held through 3 engagements. This was not the same as winning. Cole was clear about this in every debrief, in every report, in every conversation where someone used a word that suggested the situation was improving faster than it was. The devouring had been pushed back, had paused twice more in the third engagement, each time for a few seconds, each time in response to something the human tactical units had done. It was learning. So were they. Cole tracked this in the way he tracked everything, not on paper, not on a display, but in his head where the picture was always running. He carried the shape of the engagements with him, turned them over in quiet moments, let them settle the way sediment settles in still water until the thing at the bottom became clear. Between the third and fourth engagements, Velsatari found him on the observation deck. The alien sat beside him. This was not a small thing. Cole had learned enough about Tessari body language by now to know that. For a species that had evolved on a world with no apex predators, sitting beside something they classified as dangerous was a gesture that went deeper than courtesy. It was an act of deliberate trust. The kind you made when you had decided the risk was worth it. Cole did not comment on it. He looked out the viewport at the debris field from the last engagement and waited. Velsatari said, "Why do you keep going back? Not why do humans fight? Not why is your species capable of this?" The question was specific. Personal. Why do you, this one particular human who could have stayed behind any number of lines, keep going back to the place where the thing is? Cole was quiet for a while. "Because someone has to," he said. He looked at the debris outside. A piece of plating turned slowly against the starfield, catching light on one side and losing it on the other, turning, catching, losing. And because, leaving something like that out there, while we sit somewhere safe. He paused. "I couldn't sleep after. That's not a figure of speech. I actually couldn't sleep." Velsatari was quiet. "Is that why the Admiral looked the way he looked," it said, "when we sent our transmission?" Cole turned his head and looked at the alien. The bioluminescence across its thin frame was a low, steady color. Something between blue and gray. The color, Cole had come to understand, of a creature that is very honestly uncertain. "Yeah," Cole said. "Reckon that's exactly what it was." For a moment neither of them said anything. Then Velsatari's color shifted. Slowly, the way weather shifts, not all at once but building, deepening. It went warm gold. The warmest Cole had seen from it. The kind of gold that did not need explaining. He looked back out the viewport. The debris kept turning. The stars kept burning. Somewhere past the edge of visible space, the devouring was doing whatever the devouring did between engagements, regrouping, or recovering, or simply existing in the way that very old and very large things exist, without needing reasons. It would come back. Cole knew this. Everyone did. The fourth engagement was the longest. 9 hours. Cole coordinated from the command deck of the lead vessel. Nora flew 4 separate sorties, landing and relaunching 3 times, eating half a nutrition bar between the second and third run because there was not time for the other half. Lena worked in the medical bay through all 9 hours without sitting down once. Ray OTT's name was still on the inside of her kit bag. She did not look at it while she worked. She did not need to. She knew it was there. The devouring pushed harder this time. Adapted to 2 of the tactics that had worked in previous engagements. The humans adapted back. Slower the first time, faster the second, finding the rhythm of it. The same rhythm that exists in every fight that goes long enough to become a conversation between 2 things that are learning each other. At hour 7, the line bent. Not broke. Bent. Cole called 3 things in 20 seconds that nobody else on the deck had seen coming. They worked. The line straightened. At hour 9, the devouring withdrew. Not retreated. Withdrew was the right word. It pulled back with the kind of deliberateness that the Accord's analysts would spend weeks arguing about. It did not feel like defeat. It felt like calculation. In the silence that followed, on a deck that smelled like burnt wiring and recycled air and people who had been working very hard for a very long time, Cole sat down on the floor with his back against the navigation console and closed his eyes. No one bothered him. Nora, in the landing bay, climbed out of her strike craft and stood still for 30 seconds. Just stood. Then she went to find Lena, because she had a cut on her forearm from a panel that had come loose in the last sortie and she had been ignoring it for 3 hours. Lena looked at it, cleaned it, closed it, taped it. "You're welcome," Lena said, before Nora said thank you. "Thank you," Nora said. "I know." Outside, the stars burned on, the devouring did not die. This was the first thing Cole said when the post-engagement briefing started, in the same flat and even tone he used for everything, and it landed in the room the way a stone lands in water. The silence after it was the sound of people understanding something they had partly known and were now fully knowing. It had withdrawn. Past the engagement zone, past the rally points, past the last sensor buoys the Accord had placed at the edge of map space. The tracking signals chased it for 11 days before losing it somewhere beyond the galactic rim, in the kind of dark that does not have a name because nothing had ever come back from it to report. It would come back. Nobody said this out loud in the briefing. Nobody needed to. But it was gone for now. Gone was enough. The Accord Council's invitation to humanity arrived 6 days later. The language of it was formal and precise and 11 paragraphs long, which was considered extremely brief by Accord diplomatic standards. It had been written and rewritten many times. Velsatari had been part of the group that wrote it. The hardest part, it told Cole afterward, was not finding the right words for what they were offering. It was finding the right words for what they were admitting. That they had been wrong. About what humanity was. About what danger meant and what it looked like and what you did when the thing that frightened you turned out to be the only thing standing between everything else and the dark. The ceremony was held aboard the Joint Command vessel. It was 12 hours long. Admiral Crane stood through all of it. His feet hurt by hour 4. He did not mention it, would not mention it, and the aide who noticed him shift his weight slightly hour 9 said nothing either because some things are understood between professionals without being spoken. Representatives from all 41 Accord species were present. Some in person. Some by transmission. Some in forms that required the room's atmosphere to be adjusted in 3 different places. The ship's environmental systems worked very hard that day and did not complain. When it was done, Crane shook Velsatari's upper left hand, which was the Tessari gesture for agreement between equals. He had practiced it twice that morning. He did not make it look like he had practiced. Humanity was the 42nd member of the Galactic Accord. Velsatari's bioluminescence stayed warm gold for the rest of the day. The mess hall was loud that evening. 42 species in one room made a noise that had no name in any single language, A layered, overlapping sound that was not quite music and not quite conversation but was somewhere between the two, something that happened when very different kinds of people all felt, at the same time, that they were in the right place. Cole and Nora were in the corner, still in their dress uniforms, which neither of them was comfortable in, both of them doing a good job of not showing it. On the table in front of them were 2 dishes of food that were technically diplomatic gifts from the Tessari homeworld. The presentation had been careful and formal. The Tessari delegate who brought them had explained, with genuine pride, that they were made from plants native to the oldest inhabited region of the Tessari home continent, prepared according to a method that had not changed in 3,000 years. Nora picked up her fork, put some of the food in her mouth, chewed. Her face went through several things. "It tastes like sadness and lawn clippings," she said. Cole ate a bite, looked at the wall for a moment, ate another bite. "It grows on you," he said. "Does it?" "No," he said. Nora set her fork down. Cole kept eating in a way that was not enjoyment but was commitment, which was its own kind of stubbornness. Around them, the room was full and warm and loud with all those different voices. Through the wide viewport behind their table, the stars were doing what stars always did, burning without any awareness that anything had happened, that anything had been lost or saved or held at a cost that would take a long time to finish counting. Nora looked at the stars. Then she looked at the table, at her fork, at the dish of Tessari food that she was not going to finish. "Ray OTT's name is on my kit bag," she said. Not loud. Not building to anything. Cole did not look up. "I wrote it there after he died," she said. "Just so someone knew where it was, that it was there." Cole put his fork down. He looked at the table for a moment, then out the viewport at the stars. "Yeah," he said. That was all. It was enough. They sat with it for a while, the noise of the room around them, the voices in 42 languages, the particular kind of warmth that lives in a crowded place full of people who have all been through the same thing and are now standing on the other side of it, whatever the other side turns out to mean. Nora picked her fork back up, ate another bite of the Tessari food. Her face did the same things again. She ate it anyway. Later that night, when the mess hall had thinned out and the ship had gone to its quiet overnight mode, Velsatari sent a final report to the Accord Council. It was the last report it would file as a diplomatic observer. Going forward, its role would change. Everything's role would change. The report covered the ceremony, the formal membership confirmation, the logistical steps that would need to follow. Standard material. Correctly formatted. Complete. At the end, it added a section that was not part of the required format and that the council would read once and file and never formally respond to. It said, "We called them because we had run out of options. I want to say clearly, for the record, that this was our failure and not their inheritance. They did not fight because fighting is what they are. They fought because they could not look at what was happening and choose to be somewhere else. These are not the same thing, and I think we have spent 600 years confusing them." It paused at the end of that line for a long time before writing the last part. "The universe cried for aid," it wrote. "And they came. Not because we deserved it. Not because they were certain they would survive it. But because someone had to, and they could not sleep knowing they had not." It sent the report. Then it went to stand at the viewport in its quarters and look out at the same stars Nora and Cole had been looking at, the same burning, indifferent, enormous dark. And for the first time since it had set foot on Earth and been handed paperwork, Velsatari understood that it was not afraid. It did not know what to replace the fear with. It stood at the viewport for a long time, looking at the stars, letting the new feeling settle into the shape of something it did not yet have a name for. Outside, the stars burned on. They always did. For the first time, that felt like enough.